Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei Eliezer. This one is chapter 5, and this is creation, the third day. On the third day, all the earth was flat like a plain, and the waters covered the surface of all the earth. So we're diving right in here, pun intended. Because the water thing. All right, this is as simple and straightforward as it gets, as it even is expressed in the proper order. And when the word of the Almighty was uttered, let the waters be gathered together, Genesis 1:9, the moment that God commanded the waters to be gathered together within the physical realm of creation, the water needed a reason to do so. What does this mean? Furthermore, we have learned that God created the world at first through judgment, through gvura, right? Borders, boundaries, limitations, functions, and the like. Which is why when it says in English, when the word of the Almighty was uttered, in Hebrew it is ksheyatsa hadibur, the speech, the word, mipi hagvura, from the mouth of the gvura, meaning the left side. As a result, the mountains and hills arose from the ends of the earth, and they were scattered over the surface of all the earth, and valleys were formed over the inner parts of the earth, and the waters were rolled together and gathered into the valleys, as it said, and gathering together of the waters he calls the seas, Genesis 1:10. According to the Gra, the Vilna Gaon, when God spoke, he literally created craters in the earth, which caused the seas to be, and not to mention the cavities within the earth itself. And even more interesting, if that's not enough, he said that not only were craters formed to create the oceans, but so were the hills and the mountains that we just read about. So in other words, it didn't only go that way, it also went this way. And if you think about it, the hills and the mountains are what separate the waters today here on earth, right? You can have an ocean, a river, anything. It doesn't matter what separates it. It's the earth. So in other words, the water was here first. The earth separates the waters. Forthwith, the waters became proud. In Hebrew, it's nitga'u hamayim, nitga'e, ga'ava, proud. The waters became proud. How could waters become proud? How could the moon become proud? We'll discuss this in Day 4. Did God's creation attempt to go against his will? Chas v'shalom. We are seeing the current process of creation itself. This is while this is happening. From emanation, thought, to creation, which is the raw material, to formation, and then the final product, which is the world today. Well, back then anyway. Like all things, there is an order to things. This is God's order. And this is what we're learning here. Now, what did the waters actually want to do? And they arose to cover the earth as at first. Remember, at first, think of just a big blue marble. That's us. Nothing. It's all water. Then God created the hills and the valleys and the mountains, and all the erosion started to happen. And then the water kind of sank in and it went to where it needed to go. He separated the waters from the waters. Not only the waters from the waters above and below, but here on earth there's a separation of the waters. All of God's creation, so in other words, they wanted to go back to how it was at first. Despite all that, was there enough water to actually cover the whole earth after all this? Yes, but God had to shove them down, if you will. In other words, this is what we're seeing here right now. Anyway, I don't want to spoil it for you. Just watch or listen anyway. All of God's creation has a purpose and personality. This is very important to remember. They are all more spiritual than we are, than human beings are by nature, and again, pun intended. But our potential is, of course, greater than even the angels themselves, and the angels know it. In fact, and some of you may already know this, the name Elohim, which represents judgment, the Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. For the Genesis 1, we see the name Elohim creating everything that we supposedly know today as nature, right? So the name Elohim has the same numerical value as Hateva. the nature. God created everything with purpose, but during the formation process, there is always going to be raw material not in its place. It's like coming to a painter. Again, the process, during the process. It's like coming to a painter or a sculptor while they're working on a creation and saying, it's a mess, right? You're going to get up from your barber's chair halfway through. He's like, what is this? What have you done? It's like, wait, it's not done yet, right? Now, not everyone is a Jackson Pollock, obviously. All his paintings seem like they were right in the middle. Yep, okay, I'll stop now. Great. But generally speaking, the artist looks upon a blank canvas and already sees the finished creation, as well as a sculptor looking upon nothing more than a piece of wood or a block of marble or the side of a mountain. The creator of all things, already knowing the end from the beginning, could have just snapped his metaphoric fingers and everything would have been set and ready to go. So why the process? The process, my friends, is all for our benefit. It's all for us. Do we see us in God, or do we see God in us? Hopefully both. Okay, obviously not equal. Heavens no. But our soul is a personal piece of the divine, which is eternal. Our neshama is a piece of God. A piece of God, okay? The soul has no beginning, nor does it have an end. It is all from God, who has no beginning and no end. He didn't create it. He didn't form it. Unlike everything else, including man, but the soul, that's what sets us apart from all the rest of creation, you see? So when the seas were gushing and roaring and rising, perhaps like the sounds of many waters, when the Holy One, blessed be He, rebuked them and subdued them, as it says in Pirkei Eliezer, this rebuke is not God yelling at His creation for behaving the way He created it to behave. It's like yelling at an infant for crying. That's what they do. In order to make the child stop, right, you have to do something as a result. You can't just shush. It doesn't work like that, okay? So this is God dealing with His creation, forming it as we are reading. So in order to make the child stop crying, you have to do something as a result in order to pacify the child, like giving it a pacifier or whatever else will divert, if you will, this response to one that is both good for the child, your own creation, and of course, yourself. Now everybody's happy. In this case, it was creating borders and boundaries. This is what He did for the sake of the waters, ultimately for our sake. Have you ever wondered why the water all over the world does not go beyond its designated borders, i.e. onto land, unless, of course, God commands it to do so? We have seen this a few times already in our lifetime. How do we learn about the Creator? Through His creation from the very first steps. Please read with me Psalms 104, starting with verse 6. Okay? You covered the deep as with a garment, the waters stand on the mountains. That's in the beginning. From your rebuke, here we go. They fled. From the sound of your thunder, they hastened away. Now again, this is not God yelling. This is God relaying His desires, unfiltered. Don't forget, Exodus 20, verse 15. And all the people saw the voices on the torches and the sound of the shofar. They saw the sound, see? And the smoking mountain and the people saw and trembled, so they stood from afar. All of creation trembles when God speaks, especially during the process of formation. What is the difference between God telling the oceans not to go on land and telling the children of Israel not to bear false witness? No, don't do this. But coming from God, it might kill you. Actually, in the case of the children of Israel, it did for the first 2 times. So this is judgment. These are boundaries, and they're all necessary for a harmonious creation. It's very simple. But let's keep reading Psalms, and you will see the answer staring right at you. Verse 8, they ascended mountains, they descended into the valleys, to this place which you had founded for them. Special place for the water. In other words, this is your spot, and this is where you will remain until I tell you to go get excited and go take out this or that or the other. You set a boundary that they should not cross, that they should not return to cover the earth. Gvul samta. Gvul was a gvul. Gvul is a border. Israel borders a gvulim Israel mitzad mizrach ze Yarden. Israel borders the Jordan on the eastern side. So again, he gave boundaries, borders that they should not cross. He sent the springs into streams. They go between the mountains. See, everything was thought of before it had already been created, before it happened. Why did God separate the waters? Verse 11. They water every beast of the field. The wild donkeys quench their thirst. Okay, so yeshku kol chayato hasadeh. In other words, you're watering this for the sake of the beasts of the field. There's also a whole bunch in between, which we will see. But this is why God does things. Ultimately, it's all for his creation. And placed them beneath the soles of his feet and measured them with the hollow of his hand, that they should neither decrease nor increase. Obviously, no feet, no hands. This is, again, for our feeble understanding. So pay attention to detail here. What happens when you walk along the beach, let's say? The impression of your foot on the sand creates kind of like an indent, right? While raising the sand around it enables water to stay in that little accidental valley that you just created, right? You walk along the shore, the water comes over, some of it'll stay behind. Some, again, if you take a deeper step, it'll go over the borders a little bit. So think of it like this, right? Giving you some practical thought here. So that's what people do. It's all an accident. Do you know exactly how many grains of sand you pushed aside when you took that step? Or perhaps the parameters of the indent of your foot. Maybe you know exactly how many drops of water would enter and remain in said indent in the sand or impression in the sand. You don't know this. No to all, right? Because we are human beings. This is not our business. This is not our concern. But lehavdil, to make a distinction, this is how God does it. And measured them with the hollow of his hand. Who can measure God's hand? There's no hand to measure. You see, that's none of our business. He'll tell you, sort of, in a sense, that in a way that we can relate to how he did all things, but don't concern yourself with this, because it's not going to help you. Know that it is done. He's showing you, right? So, he measured them with the hollow of his hand, that they should neither decrease nor increase. When we walk along the beach, we cause mini craters within every step that we take. But that was never our purpose. That's just a result of walking on sand or water or wherever else, or gravel, okay? But when God does it, it has absolute purpose, just like everything else that God does. Everything is purposeful, and everything is measured as well, and everything remains according to his perfect will. So, if we have been taught already to clear our minds, keep practicing that, by the way. The more you will clear, the more you will see. We've been taught already to clear our minds and not even begin to think that God is like us. Then why do we constantly see the scriptures referring to God's hands, arms, eyes, mouth, feet, and so on, right? So now when you walk on the beach or dig your toes into the sand, you might find a new appreciation for God's creation. Just walk along the sand. Let the water cover your footprint. Just a little extra something over there. For that moment of connectivity to your Creator who created everything, you see around you, this was done for you. Everything, we have everything here that we need in order to connect just a little bit more with God. Use this. Now tell me please, That's not a humbling and a beautiful thought. Tell me you don't just want to cry right now and praise God because, a mere nod will simply not suffice. This is who we are. This is what God gave us. The same can be said of God's emotions, okay? Do you think that God shares human emotions like we do? Do you think that God gets angry like we do, or jealous like a human, or even love? Do you think that you know how God loves truly? Verily I say to you, you do not. But you will. We all will. But if you don't see it now, how can you see it then? So see this right now. How the Creator of all things did everything for our sake, down to the smallest detail, down to a single grain of sand. From impossible to understand creations to the simplest of examples. All for us. Take this in. That's right. That's for us. Thank you. Every day, all the time, as much as possible. This helps us connect. And this is why also getting out into nature is very important. I told you, the beach is my favorite place, as you can see. Anyway, he made the sand as the boundary of the sea, just like a man who makes a fence for his vineyard. So what else can we learn from how God operates? Each creation is unique in its own way, and therefore it has its own path of growth or correction that is exclusive to it. We know that rainfall is mercy, but when it falls hard, what happens? It's kind of judgment, right? Did God not use these very same feisty in nature waters to exact judgment upon the world during the time of Noah's flood? Did he not do the same during the splitting of the sea that demolished the Egyptians? Split the sea, mercy; cover the sea, judgment. How could that be within the same element? It's not only what it is, it's how it's used. In Isaiah 43:16 it says, "So said the Lord, who made a way in the sea and a path in the mighty waters." U'b'mayim azim, as we discussed. These mighty waters, mayim azim, these mighty waters are on the side of judgment. And that way, and that's the way to correct those specific waters. That can only be through the aspect of judgment to receive that outcome from this piece of creation. And so, boundaries were placed over there. This is your function. This is where you will stay until I will call you. Judgment is not as we know it here, okay? Or as we may perceive in our reality. You think judgment, you think it's something terrible. It's judgment. No, it's righteous judgment. It's necessary for balance. It's necessary for reproof. It's necessary for tikkun, for rectification. If we did not have judgment, the world would not stand. Too much chesed, it's nothing. You can't build on top of that. You need them both to receive Tiferet, which, by the way, we are in the week of Tiferet right now, counting the Omer, the week of splendor, perfect balance between mercy and judgment. Would you let your small child crawl around a house freely with all the exposed corners, electrical sockets, or anything else they might, pull down on their heads? Of course not. Playpen, boundaries, protection, give them a helmet, I don't know, out of absolute love and concern, righteous judgment. God, you see, this is how God created all things right now. This judgment is righteous judgment for our own protection. What happens if God would have, let's say, made the beasts of the field not afraid of man? So you would have lions and tigers and bears, someone say, oh my, running into our city just hunting human beings. We're not on top of the food chain. We are no more than infants in a playpen. And if God did not set up boundaries, it would have all been over way before it began. The fence is not only so the sheep don't get out, it's so the wolves don't get in. The Torah is our fence, our high voltage barbed wire fence. It is for our own protection, and it serves as both defense and offense. A lot of fences here. Okay. Bottom line, God is awesome. Can I get an amen? Yes. Thank you. Okay. When they rise and see the sand before them, they return to their former place, as it is said in Jeremiah 5:22. Will you not fear me, says the Lord, or do you not quake from before me? For I made sand a boundary for the sea, an everlasting ordinance, which it cannot pass, and its waves toss themselves. Nope, there. Yet they cannot prevail, and its waves roar, but they do not pass it. The sea's got a personality. Sometimes it rages, sometimes it's calm. So again, here it says gvul. Okay, gvul, borders. The borders, boundary, same thing. Fear one, fear none. Before the waters were gathered together, the depths were created. You see, like all things, God is going to first create the place, then that which will take up that space, right? First the place, then inhabiting the space. God created the whole world before placing his prized possession within it, man. These are the depths which are beneath the earth. Now, if you delve even deeper into Kabbalistic texts and Midrashim, you will read that these are 7 depths, 7 of these, each one that lies beneath one of the 7 continents. Okay, yes, there are the 7 seas, but this one's specifically under the continents. The waters of the deep are not the same as the seas or the oceans. Although there are 7 seas as well as 7 realms in heaven and hell and so on, the 7 days of the week, and not to mention the 7 layers of underground civilizations, oh yes. But this is water that was told to remain until the time of the flood, after which it was sent back from whence it came, and it lies in wait until it will be recalled once again. Genesis 8:11. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on this day, all the springs of the great deep were split, and the windows of the heavens opened up, right? Niftechu arubot hashamayim. Aruba is chimney. The openings of heaven, open, water came down, and the springs that were separated of the deep, they all opened up. Now, I'm aware that most likely the world's topography had changed after such a cataclysmic event, but you need to understand that those same waters that destroyed the world once before, almost undoing the order of creation, and the waters became exceedingly powerful upon the earth, and all the lofty mountains that were under the heavens were covered up. In other words, it just came back and did what it originally wanted to do during the days of Noah. God now allowed it to do. That is its natural position. You see, every moment that we are not swimming right now is because God loves us, just like they were before God made them. And since God had rebuked these waters before to go to their designated spots, he did so again in chapter 9. And the springs of the deep were closed, and the windows of the heavens, and the rain from the heavens was withheld. So this is 3 things: springs of the deep, windows of the heavens, and rain from the heavens. 3 things took place here. And the waters receded off the earth, and more the water diminished at the end of the 150 days. Let's continue. For the earth is spread upon the water like a ship which floats in the midst of the sea, so likewise is the earth spread out over the water, as it is said, to him that spread forth the earth above the waters. Psalms 136:6. The Hebrew uses the words tsafa, which means float. Now, does the earth float above the water? No, it does not. So what are our brilliant sages trying to tell us here using this specific vernacular? 2/3 of the world is covered in water. Simply put, there is more water than dry land, and just like God held back the waters so they should not swallow up the world, so too, according to his word, things are lifted up. God's word, naso, it carries, it lifts up. So it almost seems like it's floating above it. In other words, it doesn't matter what's happening over here. God's word will lift everything above. So this is the best way that they kind of explain it. It's actually brilliant if you think about it. So in this case, since we are speaking of water, for something to remain out of it or on top of it, it floats. Okay, now I guess now we're going to go inside. He opened an entrance to the Garden of Eden because thence were planted upon the face of all the earth all kinds of trees yielding fruit according to their kind, and all kind of herbs and grass thereof, and in them was seed, as it said, wherein is the seed thereof upon the earth. Genesis 1:11. So now let's break this down, because if you actually read Genesis, you'll see it's out of order. Before death entered into the world, and Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden, the spiritual affected the physical realities. The spiritual affected the physical realities. So when we read the story of the Garden of Eden, what's going through your mind is some beautiful garden paradise with incredible trees of every kind. All the animals live in harmony, and man and woman are wandering around in their birthday suits. This is not the case. Man only became physical when he was removed from the spiritual. The Garden of Eden that Adam was in was not a gorgeous, magical garden. Okay? The tree was not actually a tree like we know it today. It's something different, and yet it resembles a tree with its roots and trunk and branches and leaves and fruit and so on. Torah, get it? Okay. Man only became physical when he was removed from the spiritual, which means the Garden of Eden is a spiritual place. However, there are two Gardens of Eden, just like there are two everythings, like we said. There's an upper Gan Eden and a lower Gan Eden. Each one is aligned with its spiritual counterpart. And we also know that there are a few entrances to the physical Garden of Eden. Again, that's still not the one that Adam was in. Through the physical one you get to, that's like the waiting room, and then that's the spiritual one. Okay, they were there, and then they out to the world. Okay, so again, we also know that there are a few entrances to the physical Garden of Eden, likely closer with the image that may be going through your mind, the beautiful garden, and yet still not even close. Remember, the Torah is the tree of life. It says it everywhere. Now just keep that in mind, and it'll help with the confusion. One of the entrances, as we know, is the cave of Machpelah. This is where Adam and Eve, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rivka, and Jacob and Leah are buried. Very specifically there. I gave a teaching on exactly how that went down. In the book of Jasher, it is said that when Adam buried Eve, he began to dig a tomb for her in that spot. As he was breaking through the rock, a very pleasant and familiar scent began to fill the air. So he started digging more and more. He kept on digging until a certain light shone through as he realized this was the way to return to the Garden of Eden. God then told Adam, stop digging. Borders, boundaries, you see, this is for your protection now. Later on, Abraham discovered this, and this is when he met Adam. And Adam, when he walked into the cave, he met Adam, and Adam told him of the true reason why they were removed from the garden. The forbidden fruit, my friends, is actual sexual immorality. So that was what went down over there. Now, I've given teachings on this encounter before, but patience, okay? We're still going through the story here. Who knows what's coming up? We're only in the third day. Wait, we got a few more days to cover. So, anyway, good stuff's coming up. So back to business. The entrance of the garden does not mean that its place is right there at that point. That's just the entrance. Then you got a long hallway, right? The entrance is in Hebron, but we know that the Garden of Eden, the terrestrial Garden of Eden, is in the vicinity of Jerusalem. 9/10 of the world's beauty was given to Jerusalem. Makes sense. Because there was another place that refers to the location of the Garden of Eden, which we can see in Genesis as its borders are the 4 rivers, right? They paint the picture over there. This location is what was then ancient Mesopotamia and modern-day Iraq, and a bit of Iran, because, again, our borders today are not what they were back then. So there is a reason that Nimrod, whose name means we shall rebel, built the Tower of Babel in that vicinity. It still had power. Also, most likely, Adam was expelled mi kedim le'eden. Kedim, as we read, was the east. In other words, from the east of the Garden of Eden, he was expelled. So anything east of Jerusalem, right? So when we read in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, he opened an entrance to the Garden of Eden. It was to take something out of it. You see, that this is the language. As we read, because thence were planted. In other words, he's okay, just listen. Thence were planted upon the face of all the earth all kinds of trees, yielding fruit according to their kind, all kinds of herbs and grass thereof, which is actually the opposite of the order in creation, because if we read Genesis 1:11, it says, and God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, seed yielding herbs, and then fruit trees producing fruit according to its kind, in which its seed is found on the earth. And it was so, meaning God has taken from the spiritual garden and manifested in the physical garden, which now spread to the earth. And so according to the Radal, this is our understanding, as the entrance was opened in order to remove something. Okay, you see? Cool. When you know the order of things, and sometimes and someone presents you with information, although be it correct, should it be out of order, that's a deception. Same thing. This is how the serpent spoke to Chava. Did God not say that this, that, and just the how it's, and then you read, the other book, and all this stuff that comes out of there, like something is just not right with what is coming out of your mouth over here. He prepared a table for the creatures, whilst yet they were not created, as it said, thou preparest a table before me. Psalms 23:5. Taroch lefanai shulchan. Taroch lefanai, before me, but ahead of me, before I was even here. All the fountains arise from the depth to give water to all creatures. Just more proof that everything we have ever needed and will ever need has already been created for us. Personally, according to our own needs, but not only us. We were the last to be created, right? Right. A mosquito came before us. That's why also we have to respect all of God's creation. Earlier that day, on the sixth day, were the beasts of the field, and before them the birds of the air and the fish of the sea, and so on. And how can all the living beings be sustained if there is no vegetation? And how could the vegetation be without water? All the fountains arise from the depth to give water to all creatures. There you go, everything. These furious waters of the deep with extreme personalities are what provides the natural sweet water from beneath the ground to sustain all of life on earth. This is the water coming up from the ground. The table has been set before us all. We even have our name tags or place tags over there. The problem is most people are not even aware of this. You actually have a seat at the table, okay? You have a seat at the table. Everybody's sitting in a seat that's not theirs. That's why the world looks the way it does. If we were but to examine, who am I? Where do I stand? What do I need to do? There's your chair right there with your name on it, in pink neon lights if you want. So if we were but to look, we would see that this whole time we have been substituting a gourmet meal that would satisfy our every need. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, for street food. Is the Lord only David's shepherd, or are we all his sheep? Yes, David wrote these Psalms, but God inspired him to do so, giving him the words, for our sake. Say it. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Therefore, he is responsible for us. Say it. I shall not want. Rabbi Joshua said, the diameter of the earth is equal to a journey of 60 years. Do we need to know this? But it's interesting. It's equal to 60 years, like walking, okay? Not in a Lamborghini. Without going too much into detail, this is also referred to in Yalkut Shimoni on Psalms number 42, the Ramban's Torah of Man, Masechet Psachim, and in Yerushalmi, Masechet Brachot. The interesting thing is that in the Yerushalmi, they also speak of the distance to the firmament, from earth to the firmament, which is a 50-year walk, and it concludes with the thickness of the firmament, which is said to be the same of that of the earth, including the deep. I have not had time to dig into this topic, but the reference points are given here by the Radal. And one of the depths, which is near to Gehenom, bubbles with water and produces water for the delight of the sons of man. What's this now? The long and the short of it is this. One of the depths, as we know, there are 7. So one of them is near Gehenom, is near hell. We also know that there are 3 openings of hell. Since they don't talk about that specifically in this chapter, I'm not going to mention here. But if some time goes by and it doesn't, then I'll bring it up. I'll even tell you where to find them. Find them in the books, not in the... Don't go looking for the openings of hell, for goodness sakes. Okay, so, and as we all know, it's hot in hell, literally. So the waters that arose from the deep during Noah's flood, they were boiling, but not at first. The waters of the deep were very, very cold, right? And when they opened to destroy the world, the giants blocked those holes with their feet. That's how big they were. And God said, "Oh, really?" The water immediately boiled to the point that their flesh came right off. Nowadays, the waters that produce delight for the sons of man are specifically referring to natural hot springs of Tiberias. This is specifically what they say. Healing properties and all. Just don't drink the water because it's bitter. They do. It's called Chamei Tiberia. They're incredible. So during this time, not most of, but many of the sages lived in that vicinity. And after, they also left Jerusalem, they would all go up to Tiberia. And there was, these hot baths with healing properties are incredible. Rabbi Yehuda said, once every month, ducts rise from the depth to irrigate the face of all the earth, as it is said, and there went up a mist from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Genesis 2:6. The word that is used in Hebrew translates what we read ducts into silonot. This is pretty cool because silon, singular, is modern day Hebrew for jet. Matos, plane. Silon, a jet plane. So this is already written 2,000 years ago. Not the jet plane, but silonot. Again, modern day Hebrew is taken from rabbinical and biblical Hebrew and sort of adjusted for today, if you will. But in our case, we do have a jet stream. That we do have. Explain to me, science, how our sages knew such things thousands of years ago, how the water works from way, way beneath the ground. The language is very specific, as the Radal explains that these are tiny, powerful streams that rise from the deep, feeding all the branches. In other words, if it gets to the branch, it's got to go through everything, all the roots and the trunks and everything, from all the way down there, all the way, everything in between, until it finally gets to the branches. Think of the journey this water has to go through in order to come from the deep beneath the earth, infusing itself within the roots of the trees as they continue to flow, the flow of water that helps them sustain growth down to every leaf. Does this not remind us of your heart pumping blood through your veins, forcing that blood through your veins? Creation, it's a beautiful thing. The clouds cause the seas to hear the sound of their water sprouts, and the seas cause the depths to hear the sound of their water sprouts. And the deep calls to the deep to bring up waters, to give them to the clouds, as it said, deep calleth unto deep at the sound of thy water sprouts. Psalms 42:8, just that part. So these are the elements, primarily water communicating with the different aspects of itself. Clouds to the seas to the depths to the lower depths, and back to the clouds, as this cycle continues. And what are they crying out for? This is almost like a heartbeat. The full verse in Psalm says this: deep calls to deep to the sound of your water channels, all your breakers and waves passed over me. In Hebrew, the channels is tzinorecha. Tzino is a tube. So what are these breakers, where it says the breakers? Mishberecha. Lishbor is to break. Mishberecha. Okay? Like shovrei galim are the wave breakers when you go to the beach. So this would be, so what are the natural wave breakers? These would be the mountains and the hills as well as the seashores who cause the water to break from itself. Water misses water. It's natural. Okay, we'll see this. I'm getting ahead of my own self. The water wants to return to water. In our world, with the common eye and understanding, we all know that water always seeks the lowest point, right? This is how water returns to itself naturally. It goes down to the lowest point. But from the time of creation until this day, God has kept the waters at bay. In other words, he kept them at their lowest point because it would seem that their true natural state is to rise. What? But God separated the waters for our benefit, not only, again, the waters down here from the Shamayim Shamayim, from up there, but even here in our world, so we can live. And when we read water sprouts, in Hebrew it is, as we said, sinorot, tubes or channels. The clouds draw water from the depth. As it is said, he caused the vapors to ascend from the ends of the earth. Psalms 135:7. This alludes to the oceans, the ends of the earth. K'tse haaretz literally means the edge of the earth. Where is the edge visible? Where's the edge of the earth visible? The seashore, right? That's as far as we're concerned right now. In other words, the edge of the water, the edge for us. So earth, water. That's the edge of the water, and this is the edge of the earth. Okay, now I'm sure people out there, you're having the whole flat earth idea thing coming up when they hear the edge of the earth. So Even Ezra comes and says the following of the verse in Psalms: V'tam mikce haaretz keneged mikce hashamayim motz'o. Tam mikce haaretz, the meaning of the edge of the earth, is referring to the horizon, meaning where the sky and the waters meet based on where we see it. As far as we can see over the ocean. That's the edge of the earth. Boom, right there. Ki ha'agol ein lo reshit. That stamps and seals this whole thing. Because something that is round, agol, has no beginning. Therefore, it would by default have no edge. You see. And in every place where the Holy One, blessed be He, commands them to rise and brings the rain, there they cause rain to fall. Now, there's much to say about rain. We already know that rain represents life and sustenance, not only for us, as it will make our crops grow, we can eat, but for all the beasts of the field and the birds of the air, water is life. Simply put, okay? We know this. We have also seen that too much water is a bad thing. We've seen what too much water can do, right? And our modern day tsunamis are back in Noah's flood. It means death and destruction. But when we look for the importance and significance of the balance of rain, no other story comes to mind like that of Honi HaMe'agel, Honi the circle maker. Here we see again, circle. Okay, if you don't know Honi, you're about to meet him. So in Mishnah Masechet Ta'anit 3:8, it says, the Mishnah relates, an incident occurred in which the people said to Honi HaMe'agel, pray that rain should fall. They needed the rain to fall, obviously. He said to them, go out and bring the clay ovens used to roast the Paschal lambs, so that they will not dissolve in the water, as torrential rains are certain to fall. He prayed, and no rain fell at all. He was the tzaddik of the town. They came to him, okay? What did he do? This is the famous why Honi HaMe'agel, the circle maker. He drew a circle on the ground, and he stood inside it, and he said before God in the public place, public square, Master of the universe, your children have turned their faces towards me, as I am like a member of your household. Hey, Dad, Don't make me look bad in front of my peeps, in front of your peeps, right? For one to be able to make such a statement that I am a member of God's household, one must act at all times like a member of God's household, i.e., his son, and treat God with the utmost respect on all things at all times. Okay? I would not dare make that statement. Of course, this is where I strive to be. This is where we all strive to be. But now, thinking about this, before I utter these words, I'm looking at my life and being, more work still needs to be done. But he said it, and look what happened. Therefore, I take an oath by your great name. What? You take an oath by God's great name? That I will not move from here until you have mercy upon your children. Mercy, that's a hint right there. Mercy upon your children, and answer their prayers for rain. Rain began to trickle down, but only in small droplets. He said, I did not ask for this. Hey, what are you doing? I did not ask for this, but for rain to fill the cisterns, ditches, and caves with enough water to last the entire year. The date that this thing took place is actually, it's on the 20th of Adar, right? What happens after Adar comes Nisan, and that's where we do Tfilat Atar. That's the end of the rain. In other words, this is the last opportunity for it to actually rain, otherwise there will be a drought and many will die. So this is this is life or death right now. No holds barred. Hey, I'm calling in that favor. This is what's happening, okay? So trickle down, not good. We need water or everybody's dead. Rain began to fall furiously. He said, I did not ask for this damaging rain either, but for rain of benevolence, blessing, and generosity. See the difference between rain of mercy and judgment? He asked for mercy. Subsequently, the rains fell in their standard manner, but continued unabated, filling the city with water until all of the Jews exited the residential areas of Jerusalem and went up to Temple Mount due to the rain. They came and said to him, just as you prayed over the rains that they should fall, so it's good, everything's good, but wow, okay, everything's full, so too pray that they should stop. He said to them, go out and see if the Kreisman stone, a large stone located in the city, upon which proclamations would be posted with regard to lost and found articles, Hashavat Aveda in Hebrew, to return something that was lost, has been washed away. If the stone is still there, let me know if it's there, if it washed away. In other words, if the water has not obliterated the Kreisman stone, it is not yet appropriate to pray for the rain to cease. Shimon ben Shetach, the head of the Sanhedrin at the time, relayed to Honi HaMe'agel, were you not Honi, I would have decreed that you be ostracized. Who can... But what can I do to you? In other words, we're thinking right now, like, who does this guy think he is? He draws a circle publicly before everyone and comes to God. Listen, make it rain. No, not like that. Like this. No, not like that. Like this. And I'm swearing by your name. What does he say? What does Shimon ben Shetach say? You nag God, and he does your bidding. Like a son who nags his father, and his father does his bidding without reprimand. He's like, okay, fine. After all, rain fell as you requested. About you, the verse states, let your father and your mother be glad, and let her who bore you rejoice. Proverbs 23:25. Incidentally, I don't know if it's not relevant. I just found this out really in the last year when actually Anarina told me. She goes, do you know that your birthday, my Hebrew birthday, is the 20th of Adar, exactly on the day where this event took place with the circles? And she also told me apparently my family name Kreisman means man of circles. So interesting, right? I thought it was interesting. So I'll share that with you guys. Anyway, there are gishmei bracha, rains of blessing, and there are gishmei klala, rains that are a curse, right? The same substance that brings life can just as easily bring death, life rejuvenation, death and destruction. We have also learned about this regarding the study of Torah. If one studies Torah without the proper intention and understanding, it will certainly bring death and destruction. See other religions who feel entitled to interpret the Torah according to their understanding, and how many millions, if not billions, have been murdered as a result, according to their understandings. And even on a personal level, if you read Torah and come up with your own conclusions, and you become an island unto yourself, please look at yourself in the mirror and tell me you don't live a miserable existence. This is not how God intended for his children to live. This goes against everything that the Torah says. And what you may claim to be sacrificing is not for the sake of God, but for your own sake. No one told you to do these things. Living a proper life of Torah, whether you are rich or poor, going through difficulties or not, misery is not something that you should be experiencing. You must understand this, okay? From all the people I've seen and all the people I've met, you have incredibly happy, well-balanced people who are multi-billionaires. And then you have people who are, we're talking like flat broke. You think they're miserable? They're happy. They are content. They love, halevai alenu, that kind of love and understanding that they have of their Creator. Wealth is not always a gift, because most people cannot handle it. There's nothing wrong with it, but it's how you handle it. That's why Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob were the wealthiest men in the world, because they didn't care. Rich, poor, I got everything, I got nothing, I'm still walking the path. Thanks for all this money. Let me just spread it out to the people. Okay, no money, it's okay, but I'm still here, I'm still alive, I can still pay bills, I can still eat, I have clothes on my back. You see? If you walk with God, your needs will always be met. Always. He made you, he put you here, he is responsible. But only if you stay within the boundaries that he gives you. These boundaries are for your own protection. Don't stick your finger like in electricals. We are all children running around in this big playpen of a world. So all these people that don't experience these kind of things, they are all people who learn Torah with a pure heart, to want to connect with their Creator. So let's continue and see how in one sentence, now with this understanding, we can spot the difference, okay? And forthwith the earth becomes fruitful and yields produce like a widow who becomes pregnant through debauchery. And forthwith the earth becomes fruitful and yields produce like a widow who becomes pregnant through debauchery. We started with something good, and then what? Where did this come from? So without the understanding of everything we just said right now, then this part of the sentence with the section before it should not make any sense to anyone. So let's read them together. And in every place where the Holy One, blessed be he, commands them to rise and brings the rain, there they cause rain to fall, right? Where God says, go rain there and there and there. And forthwith the earth becomes fruitful. So far, so good. And yields produce. Yeah, like a widow who becomes pregnant through debauchery? Huh? What? Let's take that context. Let's take that learning and let's put it together, okay? What are the two sources of water? We discussed the waters from above and the waters from below, right? Like good waters, if you will. Rain comes from the rain, and then you got the water from the deep. So how do we read this? When God commands the rain, it is because his children are worthy of receiving it. You see, rain is a blessing. Too much rain is a curse. No rain is a curse. Just the right amount of rain to fill the cisterns, that's a blessing. It has to be exact. As a result, the earth becomes fruitful, right? When his children are worthy of receiving it, then the earth becomes fruitful. But when his children are off the path, children meaning Israel in particular and the rest of the world, are not worthy, God certainly will not let the world suffer because of them. God created the little rabbit that lives in your backyard that comes in there sometimes. Just as, in fact, the rabbit was here before you. What, God's going to let that poor, cute little white bunny rabbit suffer because of you? No. So, it is the waters of the deep that provide sustenance for the trees, like a widow who has no husband since he died. And as we know, when a Jew lives without Torah, he is considered dead. This widow now becomes pregnant through other means, not the proper way from the clouds, but from the deep, which was unintended. God will always water the earth because he made a promise to the earth. Gishmei bracha, right? If we're good. And if we're not, it comes from the deep. I'm still going to water the plants and the trees and everything and all the beasts of the field. All of this is a reflection on us, on Israel. How can we back this up? Keep reading. But when the Holy One, blessed be he, desires to bless the produce of the earth and to give provision to the creatures, he opens the good treasuries in heaven and sends rain upon the earth, namely the fructifying rain. And they're called maim zcharim, masculine waters. And forthwith the earth becomes fruitful like a bride who conceives from her first husband and produces offspring, zera, seeds of blessing. As it is said, the Lord shall open unto thee his good treasury, the heaven. Deuteronomy 28:12. You see, the earth, the trees, the branches, the fruit, the birds, and the beasts, all of life on earth prospers when Israel live according to their purpose. All the world it will be a happy day for everyone. As we discussed, man is the only created being that has free will to choose his own path, thereby being the only creation to not fulfill his obligation and responsibility by choice. We have a choice to do it or not. That's it. When we do it, everything is good. When not, 2022. When all is well, there is the conception between male and female. That's the unification. But when all is not well, there is no blessing from above, but rather something unintended which festers from below. Now, oddly enough, Safaria ends the chapter right here. But there's more Hebrew. So we'll continue. And it is written in Isaiah 62:5, as a young man lives with the virgin, so shall your children live with you. And the rejoicing of a bridegroom over a bride, that's the order, over a bride, shall your God rejoice over you. And in Isaiah 55:10, for just as the rain and the snow fall from the heavens, and it does not return there unless it has satiated the earth and fructified it and furthered its growth and has given seed to the sower and bread to the eater. Why were these verses given? Because the right order of things, the correct way, is that God has designed everything in this universe in order to give in abundance to his children. Everything is designed to give us in abundance. We're not supposed to just live from paycheck to paycheck. You have to understand. That's the reality of this world. We're talking about something different. The way it was originally intended. There's no worry. Did they not live paycheck to paycheck when they were in the wilderness? Every day the manna fell, every day. You can't store enough for 2 days, only on Shabbat. And yet they knew it was coming just like the sun was going to rise. That's that emunah and bitachon that we're talking about. This is what God is trying to show us over here. Okay. I've seen wealthy people, they fall ill, all their money cannot do anything to help. Okay? This is not about how much you have in the bank. This is who is your daddy, right? You need to know this. And so when we read in the Shema in Deuteronomy 11:13-17, and it will be if you hearken to my commandments. Listen, okay? if you hearken to my commandments, that I command you this day, to love the Lord, your God, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. I will give the rain of your land at its time, the early rain and the latter rain. And this is also a hint, obviously, the early rain in the beginning, the latter rain to the time of the resurrection of the dead, but practical, okay? And you will gather in your grain, your wine, and your oil. All is going to be well. If you do what I say, if you live according to the commandments. And I will give grass in your field for your livestock. Now they are your livestock, not mine, because everything in this world belongs to God, right? But now they're your livestock. They are getting sustenance because of you, you see. And you will eat and be sated. Beware, lest your heart be misled. And you turn away and worship strange gods. And prostrate yourselves before them. And the wrath of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will close off the heavens, and there will be no rain, and the ground will not give its produce, and you will perish quickly from upon the good land that the Lord gives you. So we clearly see here that God's blessing depends entirely upon us. When Israel live well, the whole world, the whole earth is happy, and there are no disasters. And when Israel do not live well, the first warnings come in the form of natural disasters, which are aimed towards the nations. That's when you get tsunamis and earthquakes and droughts and floods. Too much of this, too little of that. The whole order of things becomes messed up, or as we know it as tohu, chaos. Make no mistake, everything that happens in this world is God speaking to Israel. Everything that happens in this world, God is speaking to Israel. Do you get the hint? No. We don't get the hint. It comes closer and closer and closer to us. And when we see all this chaos around the world, we still don't get the message. What does God do? My kids, they don't hear. No problem. He sends the nations to remind us who we are in the form of anti-Semitism and persecution. That's how this works. It's written already. So as long as this happens, don't blame the nations. God sent them. Don't worry. God will take care of them for doing this. Nevertheless, God released them. It's like releasing the waters. The waters want to rage on the earth. God says no. The nations want to rage on Israel. God says no, until Israel forgets that they're Israel. And God says, okay, just a little bit. Don't fight the nations. Do what you were created to do and rectify the world. Because when you do this, and we will conclude with the last two verses from Isaiah 55, for with joy, that's how we gotta live. For with joy you shall go forth. Ki besimcha tetz'u ubeshalom tuvalun, and with peace you shall be brought. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha. These are the happy people. Money, money shmoney, whatever. Ivdu et Hashem besimcha. This is the only way that you can possibly work together with God. Worship Him with joy and gladness. Now, simcha, it has nothing, it's not about outside circumstances. I think I've mentioned these things before, but also on a personal note, you have to understand. When people say, oh yeah, I'm happy, I'm a happy person. If you're a happy person, then means you can experience a tragedy and it will not take necessarily away from your happiness or from your joy. You see? Or this and that makes me happy. Okay, so if that's gone, you're miserable, right? Yes, because I didn't get what I want. You see? The best way to do this is strip away everything from your life. Find exactly who you are. I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not this, I'm not that. So then who am I? What am I? This is how you find your root, your core. This is how you connect best to your Creator, because you're removing all the layers that you have through a lifetime of suffering placed upon yourself. If you want more on that, send me an email. We'll have a talk for real. I've gone through it. Everybody goes through it. The key is to know how to get out of it. And you have to recognize that. And it's very important. And when you do that, all of a sudden you'll be able to see most things. It's amazing. Anyway, for with joy you shall go forth, and peace you shall be brought. The mountains and the hills shall burst into song before you, And all the trees in the field shall clap hands. Thank you for doing your job. Oh, can we get a... Oh, look at you guys. Amazing. Instead of the briar, a cypress shall rise. Instead of the nettle, a myrtle shall rise. And it shall be for the Lord as a name, as an everlasting sign, which shall not be discontinued. So, my friends, may we get there swiftly and peacefully in our day. Amen. Thus concludes our class. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful week and have a Shabbat Shalom. See you on the next one. Bye.